I always believed blood was thicker than water, until the day I learned it can drown you instead. I'm Sarah, 40 years old, and I've spent my life building a quiet, steady world. I worked hard, loved fiercely, and trusted deeply. But sometimes the people closest to you are the ones with the sharpest knives. After our parents died, my younger brother came to me with a smile that would haunt me forever. He said it was just paperwork, nothing more. I signed. And in a week, my entire world vanished. I am Sarah, 40 years old. I've always been the one people called dependable, the sister who stayed calm when storms hit, the woman who believed in loyalty, honesty, and family. I lived quietly, running my own small business, tending to the house I inherited from our parents, and keeping life as simple and steady as it could be. I was content, or I thought I was, until I learned that the people you trust the most can be the ones who cut the deepest. My younger brother, James, had always been charming in that reckless, easy way that made people let their guard down. He was 2 years younger than me, always the one to talk his way out of trouble, always the one parents worried about, always the one I felt responsible for. When our parents passed, I thought the grief would be our bond. I thought we'd hold each other up. I was wrong. It began with a casual visit. He came over with that same crooked smile, holding a folder thick with papers. Sarah, I need you to sign these. It's nothing complicated, just the inheritance paperwork, he said. His voice had that casual ease that made it sound harmless, even routine. I didn't read. I trusted him. I never questioned him. I signed, and then life decided to shatter everything I knew. A week later, I woke to the sound of crumpled paper hitting the floor. I blinked at the morning sun streaming through the blinds, thinking I was still half asleep. But the stack of eviction notices on the kitchen counter made my heart drop into my stomach. My hands shook as I read the words, each line more surreal than the last. The house, gone; the land, gone; the business, gone; all of it in James's name. I laughed at first, a bitter, incredulous sound. It had to be a mistake. Surely this wasn't real. I called him immediately. The line clicked and hummed before he answered. James, I said, my voice cracking. What did you do? He laughed. That casual, confident laugh I used to find comforting, but this time it was venom. You're a woman, Sarah, he said. You don't deserve any of this. I remember standing in that empty living room, staring at the walls I had grown up in, at the floor I had walked 1,000 times, at the memories that had been mine all slipping away. And he threw me out literally and figuratively without a second thought, homeless, broken, betrayed, but I didn't cry, not then, not fully. Because beneath that heartbreak, beneath the shock, something else began to burn. Anger, cold, calculated, unforgiving anger. I disappeared after that day. People assumed I had left town, that I had broken down. But I didn't leave. I vanished into the background, moving through the world as a shadow. I learned quickly that anger alone wouldn't be enough. I needed knowledge, patience, strategy. I needed proof, evidence, leverage. I started quietly digging. I researched financial records, legal loopholes, old transactions James had bragged about. I reached out to the right people under false names. I became invisible. No one saw me, no one suspected me. And slowly, methodically, I began to collect the threads of his lies, the proof of his greed, the skeletons in his closet. James had underestimated me. He had assumed that because I was a woman, because I had always trusted him, I would crumble. He had assumed that I was weak. He was wrong. Months passed, every move he made, every careless step, I was there, or I had anticipated it. I became the quiet storm, unseen, silent, unstoppable, and all the while I never let him know I was watching. Every fraudulent deal he made, every illegal transaction, every relationship he burned, I was there, documenting, saving, planning. He had given me nothing, and yet he had given me everything I needed to destroy him. After James threw me out, after the eviction notices had landed like a physical blow to my chest, I didn't run. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse on the street. I vanished. And in that vanishing, I became someone else, a version of me that existed solely to survive and to plan, someone who could move unnoticed, work unseen, and strike when the moment was right. The first week was the hardest. Sleeping in my car, rationing meals, learning to hide my presence from neighbors and opportunists, it felt like being swallowed by the city itself. Every time I passed the place that used to be my home, my chest tightened. But I didn't look. I refused to look. That attachment, the longing, the grief was dangerous. I couldn't afford it. I learned quickly that survival required more than just food and shelter. It required observation, patience, and cold calculation. I watched my brother from a distance. He flaunted his success, laughing at friends, showing off his new acquisitions. He believed I was gone. He believed I had nothing left to threaten him. That arrogance was a weapon I could exploit later, but for now it made him careless. I set up small routines to support myself while keeping invisible. Libraries became my refuge, free Wi-Fi, public records, newspapers, online databases. I rented PO boxes under false names to receive information. I even took temporary jobs under pseudonyms, anything to make money without leaving a trace. I was ghosting my former life, erasing my existence from the places James knew me. but my mind never stopped working. Every night I returned to my small, hidden corner with my notes, spreadsheets, and files. I began mapping out James's empire businesses, accounts, properties, connections. Every weak point, every legal vulnerability, every dishonest move he had ever made, I wrote down. By the end of the first month, I knew his empire better than he did. It wasn't just numbers and properties. I began studying him personally, too. His habits, his weaknesses, the people who trusted him blindly. I observed patterns, the arrogance he displayed, the mistakes he made when he assumed no one was watching. I realized that revenge wouldn't come from brute force. It would come from strategy, from striking precisely at his vulnerabilities when he least expected it. I became obsessed with knowledge. Fraud laws, property deeds, corporate loopholes, tax codes, I devoured it all. I taught myself skills I never thought I needed: hacking into public records, tracking transactions, contacting whistleblowers under secure, anonymous channels. Every day I evolved a little more. I became precise. I became patient. I became a predator in plain sight. Months passed, and slowly the world started to forget Sarah, the naive sister, the one who had trusted James blindly. People assumed I had left town, that I had given up, that the betrayal had destroyed me. And they were right. I had been destroyed, but I had rebuilt myself stronger, sharper, unrecognizable even to myself. During this period, I also learned to manipulate perception. I never left a trail. I made friends under false identities, gathered witnesses, insiders, and contacts without revealing my hand. I even infiltrated some of James's business circles without him realizing it. He bragged about his wealth, his cunning, his untouchable position, completely unaware that the person dismantling his empire was watching every word, every move. What kept me going wasn't just revenge, it was clarity. Every night I reminded myself, anger without action is wasted energy. Pain without planning is wasted life. I turned grief into fuel, betrayal into strategy. I became more than Sarah, I became the embodiment of calculated justice. The transformation wasn't only mental. Physically, I adapted to living unseen, moving without notice, observing without attracting attention. I shed habits, routines, and clothes that would make me recognizable. I honed my focus to the smallest details: the glint of a reflection in a window, the subtle gestures that revealed intentions, the patterns of behavior that exposed secrets. And then came the small victories, the quiet taste of power. I uncovered a series of shady land deals James had made, transactions he thought no one would ever trace. I found fraudulent accounting practices he relied on to inflate profits. I discovered hidden accounts, offshore pockets of money he had assumed were untouchable. Each discovery fueled me, sharpened my mind, and reinforced my belief that the empire he had built on lies and arrogance could be dismantled by someone patient enough to watch and wait. I also learned about his relationships: business partners who were loyal only to money, friends who envied his success, and enemies who would gladly see him fall. Each of these people became pieces on my chessboard. Some I approached discreetly, planting subtle ideas, guiding their actions without revealing myself. Others I simply observed, letting them collide with James's arrogance in ways he wouldn't anticipate. By the end of the first year, I had built an invisible network of influence, a web of information, and a mountain of evidence. I could strike in ways that would ruin him financially, socially, and mentally, and he wouldn't know it was me until it was too late. Through it all, I never allowed myself to feel pity or self-doubt. Every time a memory of our childhood, of the trust I had given him, surfaced, I pushed it down. I didn't cry. I didn't lament. I planned. I waited. I watched. And the most important lesson I learned during this disappearance, the lesson James had unknowingly taught me, was that trust is not a gift. Trust is a weapon. It can destroy you or it can be wielded. And now I was learning to wield it. The transformation was complete. Sarah, the woman who had been blindsided by betrayal, who had been evicted from the home she grew up in, who had been reduced to nothing, was gone. In her place stood someone who could walk back into her life, into James's world, and reclaim everything with the precision of a surgeon. I wasn't ready yet. Patience was still necessary. Timing, strategy, and execution would be everything. But I had already won in one sense. I had become untouchable, invisible, and smarter than the man who thought he had destroyed me. By the time I stepped back into the world James had claimed as his, I was no longer the sister he had betrayed. I had shed the naivety, the trust, the instinct to forgive. I had become a shadow, a force moving quietly through corridors of power he thought were safe. And now it was time to strike, not recklessly, not emotionally, but with precision. I started small, testing the waters. I watched him from a distance, noting how he interacted with his employees, partners, and friends. He had grown careless, arrogant. Every time he made a brash business decision, I recorded it, saved copies of documents, traced the money, and identified every weak point. The first opportunity came with one of his land deals. He had purchased a stretch of property under an alias, cutting corners, bending regulations. I spent nights reviewing public records, cross-referencing permits, identifying every misstep. Then quietly, I alerted local authorities under a pseudonym. Complaints were filed, inspections were conducted, and suddenly what James had considered a flawless acquisition became a legal nightmare. The property was frozen, his profits stalled, and he had no idea who had tipped the authorities. Next, I infiltrated his business circles. I created a false identity, posing as a consultant who could help him streamline operations. Through careful meetings, discreet emails, and strategic recommendations, I planted seeds of doubt in his employees, subtly encouraging internal friction. Miscommunications escalated, deals began to falter, partners grew wary, and I watched it all unfold silently without revealing myself. It was intoxicating, the knowledge that every domino was falling as I had predicted. James began to show signs of frustration. The arrogance that had once shielded him now blinded him. He believed his empire was untouchable, yet every misstep he made seemed to compound the chaos. Then I moved on to financial sabotage. Over months, I traced his accounts, identified shell corporations, and exposed hidden liabilities. I didn't need to touch the money myself, it was enough to reveal it to the right people. Bankers, auditors, and regulators started questioning his transactions. Small cracks became fractures. His wealth began eroding quietly but irreversibly. But revenge wasn't only financial. I understood the psychology of the man who had betrayed me. James thrived on recognition, on status, on the admiration of those around him. I began targeting his reputation. Friends who had once praised him began receiving anonymous tips about his illegal dealings, about his lies, about the unethical shortcuts he had taken. Meetings were canceled, deals dissolved, and the social circle he relied on to validate his ego began to crumble. The most satisfying part was watching his paranoia grow. Every phone call, every message, every meeting became a potential threat in his eyes. He started second-guessing even his most loyal allies. I had become the invisible hand behind his anxiety, the whisper in his mind he couldn't ignore. And still, he didn't know it was me. Every action I took was calculated, timed, and executed with precision. There was no rush, no need for spectacle. My revenge was methodical because I knew patience was my greatest ally. I didn't just want to ruin him, I wanted him to understand at the end that the sister he had thrown away was the one who had orchestrated his downfall. I also manipulated his personal relationships. I reached out to a few former friends and partners who had grievances against him, subtly guiding them to take actions that further isolated him. Each confrontation, each failed deal, each betrayal he faced was carefully orchestrated to maximize impact without exposing me. Months turned into a year, and by the end of it, the empire James had built on arrogance and deceit was crumbling. He was losing money faster than he could earn it, trust faster than he could rebuild it, and composure faster than he could maintain. All while I remained unseen, untouchable, and unstoppable. And in the shadows, I planned the final moves. The papers he had tricked me into signing years ago had given him temporary power, but now I had leverage he couldn't imagine. Every legal loophole, every fraudulent action, every misstep he had made, I had documented it, organized it, and weaponized it. I wasn't just destroying his empire, I was taking control of it. Every bank account, every property, every business transaction had been traced, and the legal avenues were ready. When the time came, James would have no defense, he would have no allies, he would have nowhere to hide, but I didn't rush. There was an art to revenge, and the art is in timing. Strike too soon, and he could recover. Strike too late, and he could disappear or fight back. I waited, observing, learning, calculating the perfect moment when his defenses were weakest and his arrogance was at its peak. And all the while, I reminded myself of the lesson I had learned that first day I was thrown out: trust is a weapon. James had trusted that I would crumble, that I would do nothing. He had used my trust as a weapon against me. Now I would use his trust, his arrogance, and his mistakes as weapons against him. The shadows became my domain. My presence invisible yet felt in every failure, every setback he faced. Every time he lost money, every deal collapsed, every friend turned against him, I was there orchestrating, guiding, pulling strings. I didn't need to confront him directly. He would never see me coming. By the time I was ready to step into the final act, James was already a man teetering on the edge. His empire fractured, his confidence shattered, his social circle in ruins. All that remained was the final confrontation, the moment when the invisible hand would reveal itself, when he would finally see the sister he had betrayed standing over the ruins of everything he thought he owned. And in that moment, I would no longer be Sarah, the woman he had underestimated. I would be the force he had created, the calculated, unrelenting storm that had brought him to his knees. I had been waiting for this moment for years. Every sleepless night, every calculation, every silent step I had taken in the shadows had led to this point. James didn't know it, but he was standing on the edge of everything he had built, and I held the lever that would tip him into ruin. The day I chose to confront him, I didn't storm in with rage. That would have been amateurish. I dressed simply calmly, like someone who belonged there. I entered the office he had always claimed as his kingdom, the place he had used to flaunt wealth and power, and I didn't announce myself. I let him think the world was still under his control. Sarah, his voice was cautious, confused. For a moment there was disbelief in his eyes, then recognition. And then finally the arrogance I knew so well, the same arrogance that had cost him everything. "You're back," he said with that crooked smile, like he was trying to mask the fear he didn't want to admit. "I thought you were gone for good." I smiled, a small, controlled smile. "I was gone, watching, learning, waiting." He laughed nervously. "For what? Revenge? Come on, we're family." Family. The word made me shiver, because he had used that word while throwing me out, while stealing my home, while laughing at the destruction he had caused me. Now it had no meaning. I had redefined it on my own terms. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick folder, neatly organized, every document meticulously labeled. Fraudulent transactions, illegal land deals, financial records, emails, testimonies from people he had betrayed, the entire empire of deceit he had built. "This," I said, laying the folder on the polished mahogany desk, "is everything you thought no one would ever find. Every lie, every crime, every betrayal, and I've saved it all just for you." Face shifted from smugness to disbelief, then to panic. He picked up the papers, flipping through them with growing dread. This can't be. These aren't real. They are real, and if anyone else sees these," I said quietly, deliberately, "your empire collapses. Your wealth, your friends, your reputation, they all vanish overnight. And the law, well, you've left yourself very little defense." For the first time, he was silent. He was used to controlling every room, every deal, every person in it. But now he had no control, not over me, not over what I had uncovered, not over the consequences he had never imagined. I don't understand," he stammered. How did you even?" "I was always watching," I said. "I disappeared to become stronger, to become smarter. I studied your empire from the shadows, every weakness, every vulnerability, and now I own it." He laughed, but it was brittle, cracking under the weight of fear. You can't. I can fix this." "I can." "No," I interrupted, firm. "You can't fix this. You taught me one thing, James. You taught me that trust can be a weapon, and now I'm the one holding it." I slid another stack of papers across the desk, a set of legal documents. His name was on them, but the terms had changed. They now transferred every asset he had stolen, every property, every business, every bank account, everything back into my name. He froze. His face went pale. No, I can't." "I won't, you will," I said softly, almost kindly. "Because this time there is no deception, no trickery. You sign or everything you've built crumbles, and I will ensure it does." For a long moment he stared at me, weighing the impossible, calculating escape routes, rationalizing, bargaining. I watched him unravel, the same way he had thought I would. The predator had become the prey. Finally, shaking, sweating, defeated, he picked up the pen. His hands trembled as he signed the papers one by one. Every signature was a surrender, a recognition of the power shift he had never anticipated. When he finished, he looked up at me with desperation in his eyes. "Mercy, please, Sarah, you can't do this. I'm your brother." I leaned close, my voice low and deliberate, each word a dagger. "You taught me one thing, James, in this world. Trust is a weapon, and today I win." He went pale. His ego, his arrogance, his empire, all evaporated in the weight of that simple truth. I left his office that day with nothing but a calm satisfaction. No celebrations, no shouting, no gloating. Revenge had been a long game, and now it was complete. He was powerless. The law, the financial institutions, and the people he had deceived would finish the rest, and he would finally understand the consequences of betrayal. James ended up in prison, his reputation destroyed, his fortune gone, and the people he had counted on abandoned him. He had been a man who thought he could manipulate the world because he underestimated women, underestimated me, underestimated the sister he had betrayed. I walked away from it all. From the office, from the empire, from the ruins he had created and I had meticulously dismantled. But I didn't walk away empty-handed. I walked away with everything I had ever lost. My home, my land, my business, all restored, all secured under my name. And most importantly, I walked away stronger. Wiser, unshakable, because I had learned a truth no betrayal could ever take away. In a world built on deceit and greed, trust is not just a gift, it is a weapon, and when wielded correctly, it makes you unstoppable. The days after James signed the papers were strange, quiet, almost unreal. I walked through the house I had grown up in, touching the walls, the floors, the furniture that had once been mine and then stolen. Everything smelled the same, yet nothing felt the same. The house had changed hands once before, but now it was finally completely mine again. I sat in the living room, the sunlight pouring in through the windows, and I let myself breathe. For the first time in years, I felt calm, not numb, not bitter, calm. The storm had passed. The empire he had built on deceit was mine, and he was gone. Legally, financially, socially, and morally, he no longer held power over me. But winning was not the same as feeling victorious. Revenge had a cost. I had disappeared, lived in shadows, and become someone I barely recognized. I had sacrificed comfort, friendships, and the normal rhythm of life to become the woman who could dismantle everything James had touched. Yet, as I sat in the quiet of my restored home, I realized that I had gained something far more valuable: control over my own destiny. The law had done its part. James was now in prison, his arrogance dismantled, his fortune gone, and his influence evaporated. He had spent years thinking he was untouchable, and now he would spend years realizing he was powerless. Every night I imagined him lying in that cell, finally forced to reckon with the sister he had betrayed, and a small, quiet satisfaction filled me, not cruelty, not gloating, but recognition that justice had its own way of arriving. I began reclaiming the business he had stolen. Contacts, clients, employees, I approached them carefully, without flashiness, without dramatics. Slowly, the pieces of the empire came together under my leadership. But I didn't just restore what had been mine, I improved it. I ran the company smarter, leaner, more ethically, and with a sharp eye that made failure almost impossible. The land, the property, the investments, they were no longer just assets. They were symbols of resilience, proof that betrayal could be overcome and transformed into strength. I walked through the fields my parents had loved, tending to them with my own hands, feeling the connection to my past and the grounding it gave me. And yet there was a lesson that lingered above everything else. Trust is a weapon. It can be used to betray, yes, but it can also be wielded with precision, strategy, and patience. I had learned to wield it in a way James never anticipated, and in the process, I had become unshakable. Friends who had doubted me, who had whispered that I would never recover, now looked at me differently. They saw the woman who had been wronged, disappeared, and returned stronger than ever. They saw resilience, intelligence, and power, not arrogance, not revenge, but the quiet authority of someone who had survived the impossible and reclaimed her life with precision. At night, I sometimes walk through the old house, touching the walls that once confined me, remembering the betrayal, remembering the pain. I don't feel anger anymore. That emotion has been replaced with clarity. Every memory of James's deceit is now a reminder of my strength, my intelligence, and the life I built from ashes. And I smile softly because I have everything I lost and more, not just property, money, or status, but control, respect, and a knowledge that I am untouchable when I choose to be. James is gone from my life in every meaningful sense, confined to the consequences of his own arrogance, and I am here, free. Empowered, master of the life that was always meant to be mine. I have learned many lessons through betrayal and loss, but the most important remains simple and undeniable. Never underestimate the woman you've wronged. Because a woman who has been betrayed, who has survived, and who has learned patience, strategy, and precision, she does not just fight back. She wins. I walk forward, the sun on my face, the world open before me. The past is gone, the empire is restored, and the future is mine. And as I take each step, I know one truth above all: the blood that once betrayed me now runs through the veins of someone unstoppable. I am Sarah, 40 years old, a woman who was betrayed, who disappeared, who returned stronger, and now everything belongs to me.